to Business Insights on Monday, the 3rd of August. Here we go. I was thinking we're still in July. Business Insights is a very exciting webinar series hosted weekly on Mondays at midday by a panel of industry thought leaders for business owners who simply want to be in the know about the latest and most significant news and initiatives in the Australian business landscape that impact how they do business. Our panel of advisors aim to reform, educate, provide strategic insights to the changes in the economic, legislative and financial landscape that affects small business. We aim to guide our viewers to navigate business challenges through the COVID-19 crisis and of course beyond. Now, let's meet our panel of industry thought leaders. Our first is Bernard Tuamau from MGA Insurance Brokers.
Morning, Adam. How are you?
Fantastic. Lisa Garrido from Enigma HR.
Hi, good morning, everybody.
And we've got Rob Skeen from Oasis Skeen Property Buyers Agents.
Good morning, everyone. And I love the new beard, Adam.
And Ian McLaughlin from Imperium Accounting and Tax.
Morning, morning, Adam, and welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us.
And lastly is Sam Garashi from Moneyclip Private Wealth.
Thanks, Adam. Great to be on board.
And of course, my name is Adam Lyle from O'Brien Palmer. And what I'd like to ask everyone to keep in mind is that the information and the guidance and the assistance and the advice given here today is not designed for your personal circumstances. It is purely general information only and should be only taken as that. If you require personal information or personal advice, please reach out to one of the industry thought leaders here and I'm sure they'll be happy to help. I'm going to hit straight off the bat with Sam Garashi. The ASX is reporting a dip as a result of the re-implementation of the restrictions down in Victoria. Is that dip going to last?
Well, I guess, thanks, Adam. It's been quite interesting with the market. Market actually fell 1.59% last week, and definitely further falls are due today. As I just before, the market was down about 0.6%. And this is obviously all due to the uncertainty around the outcomes for the economy due to this next level of lockdowns in Vic, and possibly new waves in New South Wales as well. For the month, the market was just 0.5% higher, showing that it's very much side trading at the moment. And I'd say at this point in time, it's going to continue to do that until there's a major catalyst. And I see those major catalysts as being a few things. One, obviously, good news around the vaccine on a positive side, and of course on the negative side, it just depends on whether the infection is going to spread further across the rest of the country. Now, at this point in time, the reporting season will also get into gear this week. We already had AMP announce their results last Friday. Wasn't very good. They got hammered about 13% on the day, or 21% in the month of July. So not very good from that perspective. But that doesn't mean that everyone has had a bad month. Iron ore was quite good, so our miners have been benefiting from that. Gold performed well. It hit a new record high of $1,981, and still has some momentum behind it at this point in time. Interestingly, IAG, who owns NRMA, they scraped the final dividend because of the increased fallout of COVID. I guess this is really important for all investors to take into account, because obviously as some of these dividends will drop off, obviously it's going to have an impact on everyone's cash flow, especially the self-funded retirees who are relying on that income. Now, of course, the talk of the town has been all about, the buy now, pay later stock, and they've really sizzled in the last few months. And time will tell if they truly make it, or and obviously make the investors very well off, or there'll be tears following all the promises and not delivering on them in due course. And so as it stands right now, then I would say that we're definitely going to see a lot more volatility in the coming week, because obviously uncertainty is not what the market likes, and often it reacts to it negatively. Back to you.
That's really good information, Sam. And if you don't mind, I might come back to you a little bit later and just talk about the actual market just for a moment. Ian, last week you started talking to us about JobKeeper. I was really fascinated with how this is actually going to work with JobKeeper 2.0. I still get some information from friends in the industry that there's still a lot of confusion about this. There's obviously now the added implication about Victoria. What's the latest and greatest with JobKeeper 2.0?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I thought what I'll do today is just give a recap on what we went through last week, because there is a fair bit involved in JobKeeper 2.0. So I think it's important that we really get it nutted down. So basically, there's the two schemes. So the one we're in at the moment is referred to as the current scheme, and JobKeeper 2.0 is referred to as the extended scheme. And that is going to pick up from the current scheme and run until the 28th of March, 2021. So there's three major differences between the current scheme and the extended scheme. So I'll run through them quickly and then I'll go into them in more detail. So the first one is it's a two-tier payment rate. The second one is that the payment goes from $1,500 a fortnight and reduces to $1,200 and then eventually to $1,000 a fortnight. And the third difference is that the decline in turnover will be retested on a quarterly basis. So let's look at those in more detail now. So when I talk about the payment going from $1,500 to $1,200 to $1,000, that's the full rate. The extended scheme introduces a partial rate. So basically the $1,200 is the full rate from Monday the 28th of September 2020 to Sunday the 3rd of January 2021. Now the full rate of that is $1,200 a fortnight and the partial rate is $750 a fortnight. Then on the 4th of January 2021 till the end of the extended scheme, which is going to be Sunday the 28th of March 2021, the full rate drops from $1,000 a fortnight to $650 a fortnight. So when we talk about the full rate and partial rate, what do we mean by that? So for employees, eligible for the full rate is going to be if that person worked in the business on an average of 20 hours or more from the 1st of March 2020. If you're eligible for the partial rate, they worked in the business for less than 20 hours on average per week from the 1st of March 2020. So what are some of the implications of this? So under the current scheme, the requirement for an employee to have been employed on the 1st of March 2020 and for an eligible business participant to have been actively engaged in the business on the 1st of March 2020 does not include a minimum number of hours of employment or active engagement. So basically that means that they could have worked 5 hours and been eligible for the full rate of $1,500. Under the new scheme, they're only going to be eligible for the partial rate. So let's now look at the proposed new decline in turnover tests. So remember, with the current scheme, the way that it worked was once you qualified all the way to the end of the current scheme, which is going to end in September. Under the extended scheme, you are going to have to compare for the first part of the extended scheme, which runs from Monday the 28th of September 2020 until Sunday the 3rd of January 2021. You are going to have to compare your June 2020 quarter and your September 2020 quarter compared to those comparative quarters in 2019. And for most businesses, it is still going to be the decline in turnover for those periods of 30% or more. So if you're below 30, if you're 30% or more in your turnover, then you will qualify. Then from the second part of the extended scheme, which runs from Monday the 4th of January to 2021 to Sunday the 28th of March 2021, you have to compare the June 2020 quarter, the September 2020 quarter, and the December 2020 quarter to those relevant quarters in 2019. So when I say 30%, that's for businesses under the $10 million, and it's 50% decline in turnover for business of more than $1 billion, and 15% decline in turnover test for not-for-profit entities. So they're the three major differences there. We've got the two-tier payment rate, the $1,500 a week fortnight, sorry, the $1,500 payment per fortnight drops from $1,200 and then to $1,000 for the full rate, and $750 then down to $650 for the partial rate. And the decline in turnover test is retested, and you have to compare on a quarterly basis rather than a monthly basis. So I know there is a fair bit to cover there, and we'll cover it off again next week as well.
I think from my perspective, Ian, I think it's this more than anything, it illustrates the point that people should be connecting with their accountants more often and making sure they're engaging properly. Would I be right there, Ian?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that, over this time, you really do need to keep in constant contact with your accountant to make sure that, well, one, you're doing the right thing, and two, that you're getting everything that you're eligible for.
Yeah, good. Okay, thanks, Ian. Speaking of getting good advice, I think I'd like to now turn to Bernard Tuamel from MGA Insurance Brokers. Bernard, I would imagine that the pressure on insurance brokers about claims is quite significant at the moment. What can you help us help out our viewers with in terms of that?
Yeah, definitely, Adam. Just to look at the Insurance News' top headline this week, it says, "Stop stirring up trouble. Politicians urged to keep out of BI disputes." So basically, I touched on this a few weeks ago where there are some old business interruption policies or business back policies that refer to an old clause or the old Quarantine Act. Now, that act's been replaced. Basically, what insurers are saying is that the intent of that exclusion means that all BI claims that relates to COVID-type claims are not covered underneath the policy. So there is a test case, Adam, that's being tested in the New South Wales Supreme Court. So it's going to be interesting to sort of see what the fallout of that is. Now, basically, a lot of politicians are sort of coming out sort of saying that, insurers should just be paying out claims. They're putting a lot of pressure on the industry to sort of say, look, SME businesses are struggling. They are doing it tough to sort of help out the economy. Why aren't these insurance policies sort of responding? Now, the insurance industry has come back in response to that quite strongly and said, basically the resent or the simplistic implication that just because premiums have been paid, that all claims should be accepted regardless of what the coverage says, is, absolutely ridiculous. So basically what they're saying is, yes, we understand that businesses are doing it tough, but just because there's been a transaction between insurers and an SME businesses that they have paid a premium doesn't necessarily mean that claims should automatically be paid. Now, this goes to my point, Adam, about ensuring that you have a good advisor, making sure that you have a good business insurance broker that sort of sits you through your insurance policies and explains to you exactly what it is that you're covered for. Because a lot of these tough conversations wouldn't have to be had you sit down with your insurance broker and advisor and have them explain exactly what you are covered for. Now, I do understand that everyone is doing it tough. There is this long position of, loyalty that you've been paying your premiums year on year. And when it comes to pay your claim, that insurers aren't responding. And this is why it's important to make sure you have an insurance advisor. I think the insurance industry is in a bit of a place where, I guess, unlike other industries like, financial planning or, accounting, the insurance broker isn't necessarily seen as your trusted advisor. However, if you do have a good insurance broker, that person just becomes as important as your lawyer, as important as your HR manager, your financial planner, and your accountant. Now, so basically, my advice to you guys is that, if you do not understand what you are covered for, have a chat to your insurance broker. If you do not use an insurance broker, feel free to reach out to myself or anyone else that's qualified to give you that relevant advice. And Adam, that's it for me this week.
Thanks, Bernard. That's fantastic. Obviously, the other thing that is really concerning a lot of businesses is how to deal with their people. And in many businesses, people is their biggest asset. In our business here, if we don't have people, we don't have a business. So I'd like to now turn to Lisa Garrido, who's, what she doesn't know about HR isn't worth knowing. Lisa, what can business owners and other stakeholders take on board this week about the changing landscape in the HR world?
Thanks, Adam. I'm just going to piggyback on what Bernard and in so many ways Ian is actually emphasizing this week, which is really compliance. But in my area, it's compliance to workplace laws, as I've found that of recent weeks, and I've been talking about this every week now at Business Insights, is that we've just been busy navigating through non-compliance issues with our clients rather than the more progressive HR strategies for retention and workforce planning for sustainability, keeping our employees engaged, being more acutely aware about their mental health issues and providing assistance where required, therefore implementing better strategies for future growth. We're not busy doing that. We're busy dealing with non-compliance issues, which really gives me a good picture of what HR compliance landscape looks like today. Most small to medium-sized businesses, business owners rather, and managers are busy performing multiple tasks, right, or wearing different hats. You know, in most cases, they're the accountants, they're the CEO, they're the sales managers, they're the marketing managers, they're the recruiters, and they're also the HR managers. So that is very common in small to medium-sized businesses. But what they've failed to do is, in acting on so many different aspects of their business, is they put HR at the bottom of their priority list. And worse still, business owners that I've encountered really struggle with comprehending the complex laws and rules and procedures that they need to know when it comes to HR. So that's what I really want to cover today. There was a study done by Scottish Pacific Growth Index. This was in September 2017. And that study actually showed that 29% of Australian SMBs, or small to medium-sized businesses, cited that employment regulations, including hiring and firing rules, as having the most impact on their productivity. 23% of them cited excessive red tape, and 11% listed that lead provisions or knowledge of lead provisions is an issue. So additionally, this pandemic that we're all in at the moment, and all the social distancing measures and precautions that impact work health and safety, is another added layer of knowledge and information that employers have to adapt to for an indefinite period of time. So that's another layer of complication. And this is what I guess I want to emphasize, as Ian and Bernard have, is advice and guidance is absolute key. We have seen of late a huge number of large corporations and businesses having been found to be flouting HR compliance issues, with them publicly admitting that they've failed to ensure that all their staff are receiving the lawful entitlements. So ineffective HR practices can have adverse consequences on organizations in so many different ways, including fines, compensation, legal costs. I've just gone through that particular process with a particular client. Staff turnover. You'd be surprised that even if employees are struggling to find work now, they will also not put up with not receiving what they're entitled. Lost productivity is another consequence. Absenteeism, low morale, reputational damage, and of course, brand damage. So in this year, in March, the Fair Work Ombudsman released findings of a nationwide audit of 1,217 businesses across a different range of industries, you know, and the audit recovered over $1.3 million of underpaid employees. So that's wages that have been underpaid. And the results are phenomenal. Nearly 3/4 of employers that breached the law said that they weren't aware of the rules, which is really not an excuse anymore, right? Businesses are failing the basic requirements of being a responsible employer and not carrying out adequate due diligence even before they hire employees. The Fair Work Ombudsman initiated that audit because back in 2018, the data that was consistently being received by them showed that businesses were failing to adhere to the basics of workplace law compliance, like paying staff the right rates, providing proper pay slips, keeping proper employment contracts. Nearly half of them, that's about 583 businesses audited, failed to get these basics right. So I guess moving forward, what you really need to look at as small to medium-sized business owners is you need to be super familiar with the national employment standards contained in the Fair Work Act. All businesses, in fact, most businesses, including small businesses, are now governed by this act. Now, obviously, government agencies are governed by the Industrial Relations Act of 1996, but all organizations are then governed by the workplace health and safety laws. So there really is a lot to know. So try and own it, get to know it, listen to podcasts and webinars like these, reach out to your advisors in all areas of expertise. Do not try and go it alone. The compensation and enormous fines that are now coming out of the woodwork as people are now becoming more transparent and there's a resetting of organizations, it's phenomenal. And it's just something to be aware of moving forward. That's it for me, Adam.
Thanks, Lisa. I guess one part of the economy that seems to be, for some reason, kicking on still, and basically sticking its middle finger up to the rest of the world is the property market. And who else to return to would be other than Rob Skeen. What's going on in the property world?
Thanks, Adam. Isn't it amazing? It is. It's just completely resilient. Numbers from last Saturday, we had 508 homes go under the gavel with a clearance rate of 65%. As you guys well know, it's been hovering around the mid-60s over the last 4 weeks. This time last year, the clearance rate was 71%. So once again, it's not showing a huge difference between pre-COVID levels and what's happening at the moment. However, it was interesting to note that it was double the amount of listings last year than we have currently at the moment. So I think the lack of stock is helping keep those clearance rates high. Also, it'll be interesting to see, Adam and other panelists, once the bank deferral loans have to go back, and people start paying those loans, it'll be interesting to see how the market will fare then. Good news, on the good news front, first home buyers in New South Wales could save more than 300K on a new property, thanks to the changes in the stamp duty concessions last week. The New South Wales government announced it would scrap transfer duty, or stamp duty as it's well known, for first home buyers purchasing newly built homes under 800,000 and increase the limit which these concessions apply. Now, previously, the state government waived transfer duty for owner-occupiers buying their first home if it was under 650,000. As of last Saturday, the 1st of August, the duty-free limit will be extended to 800,000 for first home buyers if they purchase newly built homes. Now, the upper limit for transfer duty concessions will also increase to cover new homes worth less than 1 million, and the stamp duty threshold on vacant land will also increase under the temporary changes, rising from 350 to 400,000, with concessions phasing out at around 500K. Now, the change with thresholds will only apply to newly built homes and vacant land, not to existing homes, and it will last for a 12-month period, which started, obviously, as I said, last Saturday. Now, what will that do? I think, if we look back at previous statistics, whenever we come out with these first homeowner grants, it always has a vacuum effect, whereby, there's huge buyer incentives are followed by large temporary spikes in home buyer activity. And I think, it'll happen certainly because I think within 12 months, people who are planning to buy will buy, and they'll buy within that period. And it will also sort of benefit home sellers as well, because people that are selling, there'll be more competition with buyers buying in that sort of price bracket up to 800,000. And I think, buyer competition always helps with those price accelerations. That's pretty much it for me this week, folks. As to a question last week from Lisa about offices, what are the fit out companies doing at the moment? They are pivoting into obviously making offices more COVID-19 safe. I couldn't find any stats on how many businesses are actually doing that, but I would say it'd probably be, just from my experience, going to the bank, going into Coles, going into offices where you can see more protective screens, hand sanitizing stations. You know, I'd say that these companies are quite busy at the moment in terms of transitioning those offices into COVID-19 safe environments. But, you know, who knows, once that's all done, where they're going to go in terms of their businesses, because a lot of companies are actually reducing their floor spaces. That's it from me this week, guys.
Thanks, Rob. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so I just quickly, before I be the bearer of bad news, I just want to ask Ian, these turnover tests, they must be terribly confusing for people.
Yeah. Thanks, Adam. I just wanted to clarify the turnover test for JobKeeper. So basically, it's a 3-tier test. So basically, the 30% fall in turnover is for businesses with an aggregated turnover of $1 billion or less. The 50% fall in turnover or more, and the 15% fall in turnover test is for registered charities and other than universities and schools. So that's just what I wanted to cover off there.
Okay, thanks, Ian. I'd like to ask everyone just to think about this for a moment. If I have something in my hand and I put it over my face, is that hard? I'll just do that again. Mask, 2 fingers, over my face, over my ears. Is it really that hard? In New South Wales alone, the government are now really highly encouraging everyone to do it. In Melbourne, it's mandatory. In wider parts of Victoria, it will become mandatory as of Wednesday. In other states where the second wave is starting to really take hold, it will also be mandatory. And I wouldn't be surprised before too long, New South Wales will be mandatory too. I'm going to put this to you. Every single person that puts one of these on stops the rate of infection by 18 to 1. Just that alone. And there's lots of analogies about people urinating in their pants and other people wearing pants and all those sorts of things that everyone has heard about over the weekend. It's not that hard. Please put it on. If you can't, it's that simple. And I'll tell you why. Last night on the news, it was revealed that up to 100,000 businesses could collapse as a result of this crisis. I'll say that number again, 100,000. Now, I don't believe that that's necessarily true. I've predicted somewhere between 20 to 30,000. But it's certainly going to be more than the 8,500 last year. We only had 8,500 businesses that collapsed and went into external administration in the last financial year. And I predicted at least a double that. But news reports coming out last night indicate that those numbers could be in excess of 100,000. Now that means every business owner involved in that business is out of work. The average small to medium enterprise business has 2.3 employees. Each one of them is going to have, particularly if they're above 45, is going to have issues about unpaid superannuation, unpaid employee entitlements. Every single one of those people is going to need to go back into the workforce, and if there's no work, what do? Survive on, if they're lucky, $750 a week from JobSeeker? Can we all just pull our heads in and start realising that wearing a mask is really not that hard? If you find wearing a mask uncomfortable, try wearing a respirator to save your life. And my point is this, 98% of all tax paid in this country is from the SME sector. And if we really are serious about protecting our economy, then wearing a mask and reducing the health risks will allow us to get on with rebuilding our economy more quickly. Because the reality is that we are going to be entering into a very, very dangerous phase, a recession. My prediction is that we'll go into a depression. And it's going to take in excess of 10 years for our economy to recover from this alone. And if we continue on going into debt, $300 billion plus. It's going to take us somewhere between 100 and 300 years to pay that back. And sure, interest rates will fall over a little bit further, maybe even go into negative. There'll be more stimulus. But once the economy starts to reboot, guess what's going to happen? We're going to have to pay more tax across the board. We're going to have to pay this debt back somehow. So please put the bloody masks on, protect each other, look out for each other in business. If you know a business owner or you are a business owner and you can't pay all of your rent as an on demand after September, if you can't pay all of your tax on demand after September, the tax office has already come out only today and said, if you do the wrong thing, we'll come after you. Great language in the middle of a pandemic. Then the reality is you need some advice. And you've got 5 other fantastic advisors on this webinar every week. I'd like to think that I'm included in that. And listen to what's going on. Because if you don't, you're going to become a statistic. Do you really want to be one of the 100,000 businesses that's going to fall over? I would like to think not. That's all from me today. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news. Sammy, I know we wanted to throw to you for the quick markets. I think we're out of time, but do you want to do it in 30 seconds or less?
Sure, I can. In fact, I can do that because there isn't a lot of change in the interest rates at all. Banks are holding pretty steady. The fixed rates for 3 years on occupier is still in that 2.19, 2.29 rate. And variable rates are in that 2.55 to 2.9% rate based on the borrower's criteria. There hasn't been many changes announced. And obviously the only thing that the lenders are concerned about is making sure that post-deferral, borrowers can make the payments. And so they are being proactively still calling their customers to see, what their temperature is and going okay. Other than that, back to you.
Thanks, Sam. I did have a question from Rebecca, who's watching us through our Facebook live feed, and she says that she's got a small business, but she's actually seriously considering getting out of it and going working for someone else. And the dilemma she's got is that there's no jobs out there for her to do that. So maybe next week, Lisa, we could talk about the dilemma that some of these employers are in their SME of whether or not they get out or stay. There was a famous song, know when to hold them, know when to fold them. Maybe we have a thing. That was my attempt at the joke of the day. It took Rob Skeen's thunder there. Maybe we can talk about that. That would be fantastic. And obviously, everyone is on tenterhooks at the moment. We don't know what's going to happen. But, the best thing about this is people can actually listen. Like Lisa said, listen to these webinars, understand what's going on, get informed and get well connected. And that's all we're all about here on Business Insights. It's where businesses go to know, and hopefully you've got something out of today. Thank you so much, Ian, Bernard, Sam, Rob, and Lisa. We really appreciate your time today.
Adam, just while Rebecca is viewing, I will try and cover that next week, Rebecca, so come back and watch next week's webinar. I might also want to cover how to create employment opportunities for yourself, generally.
Thanks, Lisa. And Rob, you've got some homework to do now as well, because we've just had a question from John Paul Salafao. I hope I got that right. He's asked if our current house prices are sustainable in the long term despite our weak economy. He's worried about his house value going down. So maybe if you can cover that next week, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do that next week. And thanks, Adam, for your advice today. I think you were the presenter of the day. Timely advice. I love your passion. You absolutely nailed it on the head, mate. So well done.
All right, folks. Look forward to seeing you from midday next week. We're all going to be here, and hopefully you have a great week.
Cheers, Adam.
Have a good one.
Have a good one.
Bye, Mask.
Very good mask.